All right, welcome to Module 1-4, Instructional Systems Design. I'm going to provide an overview really specifically of the ADDIE model, which is something that really drives the LDT program as a whole. And let's just jump right into it. So we're going to answer the big question is, what is instructional systems design? So mostly it's, when it comes to a very, basic level, it's winging it versus structure, strategy, precision, consistency, and scalability. So you can go in it and figure it out as you go, or you can have a system in place that makes sure that it's done the same way every time, that there's, there's some research behind it, that you can scale up. So super important that we have a system in place, and ultimately there's going to be different variations of ADDIE, which we'll just scratch the surface today of that, and there's going to be different things that you do that you will end up creating your own system based upon this. So I will take my case is. ADDIE really opened my door to a more systematic development of both my lessons as actually a high school teacher, but also, more importantly, my work with other teachers and adults, because that ended up being sort of a different animal that I was sort of winging it in the beginning as I started to do professional learning. But once I came through the program in the early 2000s, it gave me sort of a sense of a different way for me to approach how I work with adults. And so that's what I'm going to do here today, kind of give you an overview of this, and let's jump into it. So what is instructional systems design? It's a systematic, evidence-driven process for creating effective learning experiences. And so here we have the ADDIE model kind of shown over there. But it is organized into an iterative process. So nothing is, it is linear in sorts, or it's circular. And again, there I'm going to show you some different versions of it. But it's this whole idea that you are, whenever you take a step, you sort of know the next step that you wanna take, even if it's circling back or figuring out what you want to do. It aligns the solutions that you're developing to learner needs and organizational goals. So that's again incredibly important. An instructional designer, whether they are a consultant or whether they are working within an organization, needs to understand who those learners are, because they come from a wide variety of backgrounds, and they also need to know what the goal of the organization is. So it can't just be exactly what the learners want. It has to be in service of those organizational goals to improve performance. We're ultimately looking at trying to get better at something, introduce a new idea that will hopefully allow the organization to get better at that something. So that's sort of an overview of what it is. All right, so let's meet ADDIE. So on a very basic level, it's analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate, right? And so it's sort of in this we'll call it cascading waterfall type structure right now. You also saw it in the previous slide on, in a circular. We'll talk a little bit about that. So let's get into each one really quickly. Analyze, identify the learning need. Understand the audience and set goals. So this is when you we want training, or we have this issue. Well, you gotta dig in and figure that out. And the first project is all about the first project of the series of projects, or the first phase of the series of projects is going to be digging into this analysis. Design, create a blueprint, plan activities, create assessments. So this is where you're going in and figuring out what you want to do based upon what you figured out. And then development. This is when you start building the materials, presentations, the e-learning sequences, the videos, job aids, all the different pieces based upon the previous two elements. Implementation, that's when you deliver it. And there's, in a classroom, online, blended, through an app, through a web interface, through a classroom. That's where it comes together. And then the last one is gather feedback, evaluate. Did the training solve the problem? So did the issue disappear or get minimized? How can this be improved to better fix the, make sure people can do what's been identified, and can you do it more efficiently as well? Sometimes we find some training isn't as efficient or only gets us halfway to where we want to be. So you gather that feedback, and then you iterate again. You figure it out again. Whether this is a prototyping process where you're just testing it out, or this is something that happens annually or quarterly, and what am I going to do the next time? Or if it's sort of a one and done, like this is not going to repeat, what strategies worked that we can make sure to replicate. Because once you have a good set of strategies, you can reuse those in different contexts. So that's another place where the evaluation element is there. It's not just about did it solve this immediate problem? What sort of things that we do in that in the implementation phase worked that we can replicate that. And we do that. That's one of the things that we do in professional learning for teachers all the time. Is this particular strategy works for teachers? So let's make sure we bring it back. Now, I will say that, in that same vein, it's not always about, you can't do the same thing over and over again, because that idea of novelty and kind of doing some different approaches is very important. But then it goes into sort of your bag of tricks, your tool belt of potential things that work. Okay, and ultimately, I would say that the evaluation, when we look at the cascading version of this, the evaluation was sort of at the end, but actually the evaluation is really sort of ongoing. That you are always, always evaluating along the way. So, and so when you're analyzing, you're evaluating the results. When you're implementing, you're evaluating the results. Designing, evaluating the results. Along each step of the process, to ensure that you don't get too far without without that feedback loop, right? And so I like the evaluation sort of in the beginning. Once you do your task analysis, you really need to evaluate: is this really what everybody is saying, right? This is really what we want to do, that type of thing. And so if you want to think of this, as an iterative process, when you do your analysis, you're going to evaluate. When you do your design, you're going to evaluate. And then development and implementation, evaluate. And then also, you sort of match these up in different ways. When you're doing your design, when you're figuring out design, you might be doing some development to see what it looks like. Right, so you may conceptually be writing it down or shaping it out on paper or in some sort of computer program, but then you want to start building it a little bit to see how that works, and then you kind of go back, and then you evaluate, did that work? And then maybe not, maybe, and then you go back to the design process. So sometimes there's these other pieces within it that you sort of revisit, right? And then there's always a reanalysis and redesign whenever you're in the process, is this really what, once you start designing it, is this really what we wanted? And then you may have to go back to your initial analysis and review it, or maybe get more information along the way. So again, leading into this idea of it being an iterative process. So when you're doing the development, you have the design, you do the implementation, you evaluate, then you analyze the evaluation and the implementation and the design, and move on to the next phase. And sometimes that's an iteration number 2, iteration number 3, depending upon how many, until you get it right. So oftentimes you're taking this idea, and repeating it and mixing and matching some of the key elements there, of ADDIE, the development, design, implementation, analysis, and evaluation. All right, and so another sort of version of ADDIE is really leaning into the analysis section, really focusing on the learner. And so whether it's how they're feeling with an empathy map, or just who they are with a learner profile. And then again, we're going to go through different pieces of this through the projects, but sometimes we have this focus on who is the learner. Okay, so that is a quick overview of ADDIE. I wanted to throw out there that there are some other instructional systems design models out there that you may or may not have heard of. We are in this course really going to focus in on ADDIE, but I think it's important to be aware. I know the book and the article mentions some other ones as well. So let's quickly hit them. We have SAM, which is super, you design a prototype, you review it, and then you design, right? This ongoing sort of iterative process of a little simpler than ADDIE, and not quite as in-depth, and it doesn't do as much of, we'll call it the pre-work that happens when we're doing the sort of deeper analysis. Backwards model. So backwards design is start with what is the end goal? What do we want? What's that ideal state? And determine what it will take to make that happen, and plan to make it happen, right? So you start with the end in mind, and then backwards plan from there. The Dick and Carey model is obviously a little bit more complex. You identify your goals and the behaviors that you want. You write objectives, develop tests, revise as needed strategy, develop materials, you implement, and then you conduct the analysis and make some adjustments based upon that, and then move through the process that way. And then finally, we have design thinking. So this has become really big in the education space, where you spend a lot of time sort of understanding what is the need of your learners, users, et cetera. So you're doing a lot of empathy work to try and understand what they need, then start to define what it is that might solve that need. And then you brainstorm as many things as possible. You ideate many things as possible that might solve that, and then prototype it and test, and then kind of go back through the process. And it might be you're making multiple prototypes because you have like this one idea and it just didn't quite turn out the way you want, so you come back and do it again. So there's lots of different ways to sort of approach instructional design. Again, I have actually done some work because of its sort of permutation of in the education space. I've done some work around design thinking as well, and I sort of, like I said before, I sort of, once I have that clear understanding of design thinking based upon my background of ADDIE, I sort of have something that I do is a blend of both of them. Really, I lean very hard into the learner focus, the empathy there. So that and design thinking and ADDIE really work well for that. Okay, so that is the big picture sort of overview of ADDIE and just the acknowledgement that these other models exist. And you're gonna, in the activity, you're going to reflect on an element from here. You're going to reflect on the book. And then that's going to keep moving us forward to learning theories next week. So thanks a lot, and look forward to seeing your responses in the discussion board.